As a leader, you owe it to your team to constantly get better and improve. You cannot remain stuck. Otherwise, your team is going to outgrow you, or you're going to become a burden on them, and you're going to get a nasty call from the CEO eventually. Believe me, I've seen it happen plenty of times. The question is, how can you improve real fast? Other than working on your speed of change, which is something I've shared in a different video in the past, there are very simple solutions that you can start doing in order to become a lot more mindful, and that is your rhythm of reviews and assessments, so you can keep improving much faster. Don't just wait for, I don't know, a yearly review. Even if you think like that's a good thing, it's usually much too slow. So what can you do? Let's talk about how you review. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Aviv Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive, coach, and consultant, and I help people just like you create teams worth leading, because life's too short to lead mediocre teams, and mediocre teams usually have mediocre leaders. So let's ensure you're not one of those. And to get out of that, first, let's talk a bit about the importance of reviews. When you don't have regular reviews with yourself about how you operate, how you tackle something, what you want to achieve, what's important to you, where you're having difficulties. When you don't take a second to think about that, you remain reactive. You very rarely have a sense of where you're headed. Yeah, you understand what you have in the roadmap right now, you know what are the issues on fire, but where do you want to take your organization? Where do you want to take yourself? Are you improving as a leader? Where should you be focusing your attention? Are you just doing what's easy for you because that's in your comfort zone, or are you improving as a leader? And without doing that, without having the time to review, to assess, you're essentially operating at a very low level of consciousness. You don't have the mindfulness needed in order to improve fast, and that's a waste of your effort, a waste of your time, a waste of your career. Don't do that. With a few quick reviews, you can become a lot more effective. So I want to share the review system that I have. You don't have to install everything, even though I usually recommend to clients after we finish our coaching together, because when we are working together, I can be the person in charge of reviewing at these increments. I can have the cadence in mind and ensure that we review things regularly. But when you take it to yourself, when you have to be independent, and this is what happens when we finish coaching, I usually recommend starting with everything and seeing what clicks, what is worth it for you, and only taking something off if you feel like it's not worth it. But for me, these things have proven themselves. I've been doing them for years and I see the sense. So let's start with the cycles of reviews you need to be doing with yourself, from the shortest cadence to the longest. And of course, the shortest is going to be every 5 minutes. I want you to start. No, I'm joking. What I want you to do is to start planning and reviewing your days. And this is not something that's going to take you hours. I have a reminder at the end of every workday before I close the laptop, before I move on and do something else. I want to ensure that I review the day. This takes me like a minute. I might write down a few things, take note of whether I feel stressed about something, whether I've had anything interesting that I want to think about, and just write it down in a notebook, in an app, whatever, so I remember the big things that happened. And I plan the following day, at least like 2-3 things that I want to achieve. I look at the calendar, I think what's important, is there anything I want to make progress on. Right now I have in front of me on my desk the 3 things that I would like to achieve today, because I thought about it yesterday. I used the ability of not being in the moment, already rushing to get things done, being at the end of the previous workday, to think what is going to be important, what I'd like to make progress on. Will I always hit all those 3 things? Of course not. But having that review, which literally takes me less than 5 minutes every day, makes me a lot more effective. Because when I start, I already know what I want to do. This is a bit like when you finish the workday coding, you try to leave things, for example, with a broken test that you know you need to make it pass if you're doing TDD, or where you're not leaving a feature that's complete, but something that's in the middle, you put a comment to remember what you were doing. So you start from that. And therefore, starting the day is a lot easier because you already have momentum. You already know exactly what you need to do. I try to do the equivalent in my role, which is a lot less hands-on, of course. So start with the daily reviews because you're going to see a lot of improvement just coming from that. Next, we move on to weekly reviews. These should take you probably 10-15 minutes, where what you do is you start with just the review, first of all, the first couple of times if you're just getting started, and that's about looking at the notes. I told you I'm going to write down 1 or 2 things every day that I found interesting, that I want to focus on, and I review them then at a weekly scale to see if something's repeating. Maybe I felt like on Monday, like this was a big issue, but now at the end of the week, I'm no longer even remembering what I meant by that. So that wasn't really a big issue. I want to review that and see if there's anything that I need to turn into some sort of weekly focus, something that I want to keep in mind, something that I'm going to write down as one of the things I want to work on, focus on. So when I choose every day the 3 things I'm going to be working on, maybe that's going to be in that bank of things I'm going to choose from. Just that sort of weekly review is very impactful. Leveling up is once you find that you're actually doing this, if you've done this for a couple of weeks or so, is to be a lot more deliberate with your week. So lay down how your next week should look like. What are the boulders, the big things that ought to happen, and start assigning those. You can move them as things happen during the week. But again, we're using our sense of being before things actually happen to think, how would an ideal week look like? Not ideal as in a total dream, but I know what I'm going to have on the calendar. I know what's important. Before I get into the fires, before I get into the next week, you're still at the end of the previous week. Think what it should look like. Where am I going to aim to do the big things that I want to make progress on? Not just the day-to-day urgent things, but the important things I want to make progress on. Start assigning those. Again, this usually takes me less than 15 minutes because I am now very, very experienced in this, and most of my weeks don't look all that different, putting aside, I don't know, Iran deciding to throw a bunch of ballistic missiles at civilians in Israel. But other than that, most of my weeks look pretty much the same. So I can just assume that things will be similar. So even if the first few times it takes you more than 15 minutes, I'd be surprised if it's going to take you more than 20 minutes. So do that. And just by that, if we were to stop here, you would already be more effective and learning much faster than most of the leaders I see in my work. But we still have what to add. The next level, unsurprisingly, is monthly. Some people skip this immediately into quarterly. I'm okay with that. It really depends on what works for you. Personally, I like having the monthly view where once a month, at the end of the month, I sit down and I look at what I had achieved. I look at the weekly plans. I ask myself, am I feeling like I'm being better in getting what I want or not? I look at the themes from the last few weeks and I ask myself, do I feel like these are the important things to focus on? I look at the month ahead. I have, as you can maybe see here, I've got a planner and everything. I look at the month ahead. What sort of vacations are coming up? Do I have any events, be it business events, family events, whatever? So I have that in mind as I'm entering the new month. I can plan accordingly. Will it be a strong month, a slow month, a stressed month? And having that in mind helps me calibrate what sort of leader will I have to be in the next month? What sort of attitude will I have to have as I'm planning the weeks ahead, as I'm addressing things? Because just looking at things week by week, you might not realize the bigger passage of time that's happening. And months, I find, are very effective. Again, do it at the end of the month, and this usually should not take you more than 10-15 minutes. Moving on to quarterly, which is where I feel like the real meat is. Having quarterly reviews means that you can really set some meaty things you want to be thinking about. These I usually have for about an hour and a half with myself, where I open up all the reviews, I skim them fast, I see what I've been through in that quarter, I think about what I intended to achieve, what was bothering me, and how I actually acted. And then I look ahead for the next quarter. I look at everything that already have in the calendar, like the holidays and I don't know, big vacations, the summer, whatever. And I start thinking, what would I like to have as my theme in the next quarter? Be it working on how I communicate, researching AI, having some new, personally for me, having some different types of offerings, trying something new, speaking at events, maybe having a podcast tour. I decide what I want to have as my themes, and then using that, I am more in control of how I'm going to choose to spend every month, every week, every day, because I took a second to be there, be mindful, be deliberate about how I'm going to be using my time. And having these longer reviews once a quarter, I find, is almost magical for me, because this is the right rhythm. For example, you can check out also the book, The 12-Week Year, which happens to coincide pretty much with quarterly reviews. And I find that very, very impactful. It has helped me a lot in how effective I am, how quickly I get things done, how quickly I help my clients move, because my expectations are to move much faster than many people would expect. And that's what I think is the best thing you can do. We now move to yearly reviews. Frankly, I don't find these as impactful because, I don't know, a year is just so long. I don't even remember what I've done. I do these mostly out of nostalgia. At the end of the year, I review the year, I review everything that I've been through. I might write down some interesting statistics, like how many events of a specific type have happened. Do I feel like I made progress? But I don't usually set next year goals at yearly goals, because that's like way too long. I really think that yearly reviews are not as impactful as quarterly ones. So stick to quarterly ones if you feel like having the end year quarterly review being something where you actually look at the entire year, find your yearly theme, that's fine. But for personal progress, I find the quarterly review is where the money is. And of course, it has to depend on all the foundations of the daily and the weekly and monthly reviews. Doing that, you're going to improve much, much, much faster and become the leader your team needs you to be. So do that. That's it. If you're going to start installing these, do let me know how it's happening for you and whether it's working out. If you're having any difficulties, my email's in the video description, or you can just write in the comments. Either way, I'm going to answer you. So let me know. If you haven't yet, do check out Unplugged with Aviv, my new offering. This is probably the last video I'm going to remind it as still being in the introductory pricing, which are ridiculously low. So check it out before the prices go up to the regular pricing. I'm just trying to make it as effective for as many people as possible. So I'm trying to retain the introductory pricing for quite a while, but I cannot keep calling introductory pricing for too long. So that's it. Link in the video description, and I'll see you here in the next video. Ciao.